Hey, I'm Timmy Bauer. I'm a kids book author, founder of Dinosaur House. We turn industry leaders into kids book authors. Catch me this week on the Jesse T Show.
Timmy Bauer, what is up, brother?
Yo, Jesse, how's it going?
Man, amazing. Just was on your podcast talking a bunch of smack, hopefully giving some people
Yeah,
some insight. And
yeah.
it was great, man. How long you been doing your podcast for?
Uh, I want to say about a year. I've been podcasting for a really long time. I want to say 3 years. I don't know if that's a really long time. I'm going to do this a lot because I get nervous when I'm the one being interviewed. But yeah, my first podcast was called The Literacy Advocate. And it's the way that I connect with teachers. Because when you're a kids book author, the teacher relationships are super important. And I was doing that. I've been doing that for a few years. Started Purpose Driven Entrepreneur, I think a year ago.
Hell yeah, brother. And so what inspired you to get into doing your own podcast? Was it necessity so that you could plug into your essentially target market or people that could help advance the business?
Yeah, necessity first, and then realizing how much I love it. So, my best friend James Carberry wrote a book called Content-Based Networking. It's the idea that one of the easiest ways to take serendipity out of the equation of relationship building, because his life was transformed by this serendipitous thing where he met this entrepreneur that hired him, and he learned entrepreneurship working for this guy, then started his own company, etc. And he was like, is there a way to take serendipity out of the equation? So he started a podcast called Inspiring Awesome, where he just wanted to talk to anybody that he thought was awesome. And so
Wow.
he's just hitting up everybody that he thinks is awesome, asking them on this podcast called Inspiring Awesome. And pretty much everybody's saying yes. And then he has an epic conversation with them. They become friends. They start hanging out. And he's like, yeah, serendipity is out of the equation. So then the question is, can you make, as a business owner, can you make this work for your business in a way that's not slimy or squirrely? And I think a lot of people that have tapped into the realization that a lot of people will just say yes to a podcast are doing some slimy stuff. Uh and I don't know. I don't know where judgment should or shouldn't be. My thing is I just want I've got a few groups of people that I want to be making a lot of real, true relationships in those groups of people. And so I've started a podcast for every group of people that I want to get in with. I'm probably about to start a podcast that is for developmental psychologists because I want to start getting to know some developmental psychologists. So I've got a show called Writing Better to Dr. Writers. I've got a show called The Literacy Advocate to meet teachers. And I've got a show called Purpose Driven Entrepreneur to meet with the types of people that could either become customers of Dinosaur House or know people that could become customers of Dinosaur House or could become mentors of mine or just generally would help me as an entrepreneur.
So there seems to be that kind of connective tissue of just plugging into the people that you want to seek out. And the way that you do it is through podcasting, which is what we talked about on your show. It's a beautiful way to connect with people. It's
Yes.
especially today's day and age too, with, just technology and, going through the pandemic to where, everybody had a different experience. Thankfully, I was here in Georgia, and it was a really easy experience for me. But I was at one time shooting episodes in my office in person with two cameras set up, and people were actually physically there. To where now all my content is coming through Zoom, and it's been a really easy way to connect with people in different parts of the world. So like I have people that I talk to in different time zones, different countries, and it's
Yep.
all because of this that we're able to do that. Although I do get the itch. I have all this equipment downstairs, and like I get the itch to do it back in person again. But it does give you a beautiful way to put out your thoughts, your ideas, to have people come on and share theirs. And it's been a beautiful way, like we talked about on your show, to have a master class on life. Like people, like you said,
Yeah.
that could be mentors, or people that could be friends, or people that can become clients. And it's been a beautiful, unique way to really operate in today's day and age.
Yeah, I agree. I think like more people should do it, even though it's going to just saturate the world with
It's
podcasts.
already
I
there.
think the reality is it's just a really easy way to start having conversations with people that you don't know.
What was your first foray into podcasting? Was it through Zoom? Was it in person? And like, how about talking about like what equipment you
Yeah.
needed and like the
Yeah.
process of the conversation? Like, talk about what it was like getting started.
I was so freaking nervous. So my best friend James, he's the one like pushing me to do this. He's like, "Bro, you got to start a podcast. It's so easy." Um I bought a blue snowball microphone, this one actually. this for it's audio, so I'll just describe it. It's a bright orange blue snowball microphone. And I downloaded this thing called Uber Conference on my phone. Uber Conference was, I don't know if it's still around. It was this tool that pre Zoom being like in everyone's consciousness. It was
Yeah.
a way that you could record conversations. And then I just started asking people that I was intimidated by if they'd be down to do an episode with me on my first podcast, Books for Kids. And I started interviewing successful kids book authors and also just anybody in that industry that I wanted to have conversations with. At first, I was thinking that like I could become a successful kids book author by interviewing other successful kids book authors and like kind of get in the clique. And there, not to say that there's nothing to the idea of like getting in the clique that you want to be a part of, but the reality is, or at least the reality was for me, the better strategy, and this turned out to be what I started doing, was no, let me start becoming friends with as many people as possible that fit the consumer of what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to be a kids book author. Who is consuming that? Well, you've got parents and teachers, right? They're the gatekeepers of
Yeah.
kids books. Um and so I want to get into classrooms and I want to get into homes. I want my books in classrooms and my books in homes. So really it needs to be parents and teachers. And teachers just seemed a little bit easier to do than parents because one teacher is like 32 students reading your kid's book versus like one parent is like two kids reading your kid's book.
Yeah, man.
So then I changed the name to the Literacy Advocate. That's another just little tip for anybody who wants to start a podcast. It's a good idea to name your show something that the type of guest you want to have on would feel flattered just being asked.
Yep.
So the Literacy Advocate is something that any teacher of reading wants to be known as. So they feel flattered just that I'm asking them on the show.
It's wise, man. What are some of the things you've noticed evolve in your almost 3 years, around 3 years of totally just kind of doing this, from production to conversation to relationships to the whole deal? Like what have you know, even maybe how you operate in the world differently?
Yeah, okay. I would say there's like maybe three phases, and I'm going from the second phase to the third phase now. So first phase was just I'm intimidated, so I'm gonna do it. I'll just write down some bullet points of things that I want to mention when I talk to this person. I'm gonna ask them on, terrified they're going to say no. Turns out they pretty much always say yes. And then I'll just bring up the bullet points and try to have as natural of a conversation as I possibly can, and record it and maybe edit it because I'm terrified that one of us is going to say something we're going to regret. I just burped on this podcast and we're not going to edit that out. So in the second phase, I realized like, oh no, editing is silly.
Right.
Um,
That's
so
actually gold. Like what you just did is marketing gold. I might actually use that for the trailer.
great, great. So yeah, so that was phase one, was just sort of like I'm just gonna freaking do it, and I'll be nervous and I'll ask people on and I'll do the best I can. I'm gonna edit because I'm terrified and all this other kind of stuff. And I would do like a low amount of it because of how much psychological buildup there was just to me even doing it. Okay, second phase is way more uh like I've figured out a few things that work and I'm just doing them like crazy. So like cold DMs after so it's not quite cold because like for me at least personally, I'll interact with somebody on social that I would love to have on the podcast. And as soon as I get any kind of interaction back, I ask them if they want to be a guest on. So it's a nearly cold DM. And almost always I get a yes.
It's
So
crazy. It's
so
crazy.
so because that works, I just do it like crazy. I have a VA that I've given her like a bunch of different ways that I would ask somebody on the show, and she just cycles through it.
Hammers away.
Yeah. Now, in case you worried that like if I've DM'd you that means that it was just my VA. It was at first. The first DM was my VA, and then after that, it was
Just to
probably
get
still my
engagement.
DM. Unless there was anything beyond scheduling, it was probably still my VA.
I do the same thing. I have a couple of VAs that help me in different parts of my businesses. And when it comes to the repetitive time sucking, if you will, just taking up a lot of time, things that like someone can do for you. And like you said, I will always respond to my own stuff, but like that initial, like maybe outreach of who we want to specifically, if I tell them my target, what I'm looking to connect with, and this is different, something else I do within the podcast, but not for the guests. Again, doesn't matter which way you use it, but at the end of the day, it's like they make that first outreach, and then I'm the one responding, I'm the one connecting, and I'm like kind of talking. I found the same exact thing, like when it comes to guests on the show. I've, knock on wood, I don't remember having anyone ever tell me no. And it's not like I get what I want and I'm like, whatever. It's just like people are really excited about being on a podcast. Like they want to share what they've been through. Everyone has a story, and a lot of people want to share that story, and they have things that they've built and overcome and succeeded at. And like a lot of times people are just looking to tell someone about those things. And it's just this beautiful way to get people to do that. And I've had a great run of amazing people that have just always come on and done their thing. But I will tell you, kind of going back to my iteration of like getting started, from 3 years ago until today, night and day. And I can tell you from 3 years from now until 3 years in the future, it's going to be night and day again. It's one of those things where you just have to get started. We talked about this a little bit on your podcast. Kind of the essence of it is like, what do entrepreneurs need to know before they get started in their business? Well, in my podcast, it was just do it. It was just get started. I had been given the tools in terms of ideas and motivation. Like I was called to do it. I had mentors that were like leading me on how to kind of do it. And I was following other podcasters because I consume podcasts personally. And I love, back in the day, I was listening to a lot of Tim Ferriss and like the people that he had on his show. And like now I'm into guys like Aubrey Marcus, who talks about all the stuff I'm into, from like human optimization to spirituality to plant medicines to relationships. I'm into Joe Rogan because all the fascinating people he has on. But they didn't all start there. Joe Rogan's like 1,600 episodes in, 10 years in. Like he puts out 3 episodes a week. Like he started with Brian
Have you
Redband.
ever listened to any of his first ones?
Yeah, Brian Redband and him were like so goofy. They were like, is this even working? Like, I don't even know what we're doing, but we're just kind of talking. We're going to smoke. We're going to put some weird graphics up on the thing. Like, it was hilarious, first of all. Like, it was just because they didn't know what they were doing either. And so I think people that put too much, it's like the whole cliche analysis paralysis, like just get started, like fail forward, like don't give up. And for me, I built I had this thing called show notes, which was like the first 15 to 20 minutes, Timmy talks about this. The next 20 minutes, we talk about this. The last 5 minutes is rapid fire. And that first piece was here. And then I had this other piece, which was like non-disclosure stuff. And like, it was just like a lot of like thinking that went into this. And I remember the first probably 10 episodes, even though people might look at them differently and they may be some of their favorite episodes, I thought they were shit. I was like, these fucking suck. And I was bored because I was following a script. I'm not a script guy. And so it was like, okay, here come the rapid fire questions. Like, what's the craziest thing you did? What's your favorite food? It was like, all right, I get the idea to kind of whatever. So what I'm trying to say is everything's an evolution, and you start with the idea, then you actually do the thing. And then from doing the thing, you grow from the thing. And it sounds like you went through the same experience.
Yeah, I would say I'm still transitioning from this second phase of like, okay, I figured out some things that are very repeatable and work. So I'm just doing them like crazy. Like I still operate off of a sort of script. I mean, hopefully the episode that we just did together didn't feel too scripted, but I have questions that I want to ask that I know are going to prompt the kind of conversations that I want to have.
Beautiful.
Now figuring out how to throw that out and still have all those conversations I want to have, I haven't quite gotten there yet, probably just because I haven't yet taken the training wheels off.
If it comes, it comes. But, it's one of those things. It's organic, right? Like, and when I could just tell you, as you said, being on your show earlier today, it didn't feel script or canned. It felt very flowy and organic and playful and fun. And I had a hell of a time. I think it was a great conversation. So everybody's different. And I'm a rebel anyway. You're sitting here, if you're watching this, you see me wearing a Tool shirt. I'm a financial advisor. Like, this is how I show up to meetings, right? And they're like, well, who the hell's Tool? And I'm like, well, get ready. So I was talking about some weird shit. By the way, how do you want to retire? So it's just like this really fun way to kind of show up in the world. But so talk about your business a little bit. Talk about Dinosaur.
Sure. Yeah. Dinosaur House.
Yeah.
Well, I just to talk about how it all started. So when I was 17 years old, I had a little brother who was 4. He's now 17 or something like that. Maybe I got the math wrong. The point is, huge age gap between us. And I wrote a kid's book for him called Billy the Dragon. And the whole goal was just to connect with him because of this humongous age gap. I had just read a Dr. Seuss book and I was like, I think I can do this. And my goal as I was writing was I want to try to cause some kind of reaction out of him every time I show him a new bit of writing that I've done for this book. So I did plenty of things wrong with this first book. For one, it was 2,000 words, which is twice the length of a already too long kids book. Uh, but but the goal was every bit of writing that I do, I want to either make him laugh, gross him out, scare him, or cause some kind of big reaction in him. And sure enough, doing that caused us to really connect. Like my relationship with Tristan is still to this day very, very strong. And I just love him to death. And it's so cool that I think back to when he was like had just recently learned how to talk, and I'm like reading him this kid's book that I made for him, and we develop a relationship partly off of that. So that was a very, very cool experience. And when I was in my 20s, I had a lot of friends that were encouraging me to just go ahead and publish the book and try to see if I could make it as a kids book author. And of course, I really wanted to do that. So instead of going after traditional publishing, this is where my kind of entrepreneurial spirit kicked in. I didn't want to wait. It was a combination of fear, like fear of just getting rejected by all the publishers. So that's like not super healthy, and I still have that fear. So it was a combination of that and just knowing that publishers, when you're trying to get traditionally published, you're just beholden to this other person's opinion that's trying to speak for the masses. And I'm not trying to say that they're wrong. I'm more just like I just didn't really like that.
Right.
I would much rather go directly to the masses and learn from the masses as I try to read them a kid's book and figure out, okay, what do the masses like? And do it that way. So I I took my savings. I had 4.5K in savings, and I just dumped it all on a print run of Billy the Dragon, and got 750 hardcover copies of this book. It was a giant shipment. It took up a parking space in front of my apartment, and
Oh
the
yeah.
apartment complex was like, "You have a package that's taking up an entire parking space. Can you please take it up to your house?" And I was like, "I don't even know how I'm gonna get this up into my apartment." Um,
Did you have a
so
room dedicated to your books in your apartment?
Oh, it was like so they talk people talk about this like when you self-publish, essentially you just end up making all this furniture out of your books. Like
Yeah.
you don't have a coffee table, you just have a stack of books. You don't have a TV stand, you just have stacks of books. You
Wow.
turn stacks of books into chairs, like you'll eat off of stacks of books. Um because self-publishing is you you took a shot at something that you hoped other people would like. So, so I start knocking on elementary school doors, physically, literally knocking on elementary school doors. And I don't have a background in door-to-door sales like I think you do, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So I don't have that. So rejection is hard for me. I
It's hard
didn't.
for everyone. Even in outside sales, it's hard. It's just you learn to maybe adjust to it a little bit differently.
So so I'm knocking on these elementary school doors. Plus, it's just the added creepiness factor of like, who's this strange man
Right. And you
knocking?
can't just open a door at most elementary schools. You got to ring a buzzer. Like there's a whole
Yes.
process to it.
Yes.
It's not just
And if
like
you
go
don't
in.
Yeah, and if you're not already in their list of bureaucratic reasons why a person would show up to an elementary school,
Yes.
you are an outsider and you do not belong. And I felt that. So I'm like coming in, and what I would try to do is I would try to look up who's on staff at the school before I would show up, so I
All right.
would know the name of the media specialist.
It's called
That way, I could just
prospecting.
buzz. What'd you say?
Called prospecting. You started
Oh,
prospecting,
yeah,
getting some
yeah, yeah,
decision makers or people that may have like some influence or like just names of titles of people you could even just say like, "Hey, John the superintendent or Molly the administrator or whatever," you know?
yeah. So I would buzz, and they'd be like, yes, what do you need? And I'd be like, oh, I'm the kids book author. I'm coming to try to talk to Miss Williams. Like as casually as I could. And so like sometimes they would just send me right on. So I'd go straight, hi, Miss Williams. You don't know me. I'm a kids book author. My name's Timmy. This is my kids book. And I'd be like, can I read my kids book to your kids? And I would say about half the time, I either didn't make it past the person at the secretary,
Yep.
or I was turned away because that was too weird.
Yep.
But then the other half of the time that they would say yes, I would start reading my kids' book for these kids. And that was the first big win because my first thing was just like, I'll win if I took this idea out of my relationship with my little brother and put it into the world. So that's a win. And then the next big win after that is just if anybody else besides my little brother thinks this is fun and funny, that's a win. And so, like, when I first started reading this to my first classrooms and that I'd hear the kids laughing as I'd say one of the jokes from the book. Oh my gosh, it was like it was the best thing ever.
Validating. It validated you.
Yes.
And there's so many, like I'm thinking about my sales career and especially outside sales, there's so many things that you naturally did right, but some of the things that like I could have coached you on, but you got past the gatekeeper, so to speak, and you got past 50% of them. And then you're sitting in front of a room and that's awkward the very first time because you don't know anyone there. You're just sitting
Yeah.
there and you're like, okay, kids, like listen up, scoot on up and like whatever. And it's like I had a beautiful experience to do that. One of my son's schools, actually 2 years ago almost. And they had like this kind of week where parents could come in and read a book, and like we had to hide behind like a cardboard box, and they didn't know who the parent was for that day, and it was like, well, try to guess and see who the parent was. And like I went through the whole book, and I'm pretty sure he found out with it because I have a like unique accent. So he's like, "Oh, that's my dad!" Like he got really excited, but like it was like this really cool, interesting way to do it. So I don't know if you had any of those experiences where you were like always just front and center, or if you were like a guest speaker. But it was just the kids. Like it was interesting because obviously he's my son. He sees the show, like he sees dad and whatever. He's not like he doesn't care, but like the other kids were like happy and laughing, and like it was just this beautiful experience.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so experiencing that was amazing. And then I still didn't know how to make money. So
Yeah, there's
I'm
that,
just I'm
right?
just like hoping that like maybe the school will want to buy
A
copies.
kid
Like I don't
reads
know
their
how
20.
any of this works.
Yeah.
So like occasionally, the media specialist would say like, "Hey, I'd like to buy a couple of copies for the library," and it'd be like, "Awesome, okay." And I made like $30, and it's like, "Okay, cool."
15
I
bucks a
still,
book.
yeah, I was selling $15 a book. Yep.
And your price
Uh,
point was, 74,500 divided by 750. And so whatever your cost per book was, there was some margin in there. And so talk
yep.
about that. So what was it like starting to sell?
Okay, so I think maybe I got the numbers wrong, but it was somewhere around $4 to $5 a book is what it
Okay.
came out to.
Sure.
Um, and so yeah, so I would sell them for actually at first I sold them for 13 because I was afraid to sell them for 15. It took
Ah,
forever for my best friend James to be like, bro, to to the average person, there is no difference between 13 and 15.
no.
There is none whatsoever.
Self-limiting beliefs, man. That's just kind of, you didn't know anything else,
Yeah. So I'm just like hurting myself for no reason.
Really funny.
Yeah, so the first way that I finally figured out to make how to make some money was I realized that every school at some point a few times throughout the year they do book fairs where all the parents are coming to the school at night to buy books. And I thought, well, if I could somehow set up a booth at a school's book fair well, at first this was before I thought of like when to do it. So I was just like, if I could just set up a booth at a school's book fair, then I could sell books at the school. And so I tried it and quickly found out if I just do it, if I'm just at the book fair, nobody's even coming to talk to me. But if I do it after I did a school visit, everybody's coming to talk to me. So that was like the first big aha. I was like, okay, so the way this needs to go is I first have to get a school to want to book me to read to their kids. I need to read to as many of the kids in that school as possible so that I can get the maximum number of kids taking their parents by the hand over to talk to me at the book fair.
Yep.
Um, and
Excuse me.
uh, and I need to do it before the book fair, but not so long before the book fair that I'm not like in recent memory. So I was like, okay, so the strategy is I've got to have a conversation with a media specialist, have them want to book me at the school, agree to let me have a table at their book fair, and have them have me visit their school somewhere in the 2 weeks before the book fair range.
Yep.
And by doing all of that, when I would do a book fair, I can't remember the numbers, but it was like a few $100.
So you started to
So,
learn how to make money.
yes. So I just did as much of that as I could. And I was able to make back the all the money that I spent in the first year of Billy the Dragon. I made back all the money that I had spent to produce it. So that was cool. So that was like the third win was like, okay, win number 1, it's in the world. Win number 2, kids are laughing and enjoying it. Win number 3, it didn't cost me hard dollars
We're,
because
we're,
I
we're
made
back
all
to
the money
break
back.
even outside of time spent.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. And so,
So,
so now you're learning how to make money with this book, but obviously you're breaking even. And so
yeah.
this is a year goes by. Now the financial planner, like the alarms are going off in my head. I'm like, what are we doing for cash flow? Like, how are you sustaining your life? Like, who are you living with? Like, what's
No
going
one has any answers to
on?
those
Right,
questions.
right. There's so much
Uh,
we need to do right now. Like,
yeah, yeah. I was still working at the time, so like I worked at Disney as a performer, and
wait a minute. What were you doing?
well, I signed a contract that I'm not allowed to talk about it, which is insane. Yeah, I mean I'm allowed to talk about it, but I can't say exactly what I did.
No, that's okay.
Which
So
it,
so were you in a costume?
yes,
Okay.
that's what you got.
I
Yeah,
got
that's
you.
the information.
That's it. Got it. And so I remember there used to be this place up in, I think it might have been New Hampshire, but it's outside of Massachusetts, called Canopy Lake Park. And they had these like people in suits, like different animals and things running around. And I was the kid, and you probably experienced this before as whoever you played, whether it was Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, whatever. I would go up to behind them and like pull on their tail or like smack them on the butt and mess with them. And like, it
Yeah.
was the fun. And like, those people probably hated us.
Well, I would say it depends on how rough you are with the character, whether they hate it or not. Yeah.
Was it a Disney character, or Pixar, or I know it's all kind of like umbrella, but like what kind of character was it?
Uh, we're getting into the territory. Well, I didn't think I'd have to pull the cord and be like, you can't include this in the podcast.
I do like to push the edges a little bit, so I definitely am playing, but maybe we'll find out another day and time. Were you
Yeah,
Disney World or Disneyland?
Disney World.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I live in Orlando, right by the castle. Yep.
Still do?
So I was working at the time. I was working full-time hours at Disney, performing, and then just all of the rest of the time that I could manage, I was out trying to get into schools, reading at schools, doing book fairs, etc.
So you always have this like. First thing I want to ask is, I wonder if it's just to keep the mystique, right? Like to keep the magic, right? Like it's like they don't want people to
Yes.
know who's underneath the hood, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
but you also have this affinity for like wonder, like so like childlike wonder, like whether it's kids books or working at Disney, like these are all like beautiful qualities that get like etched out as we become adults. I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
times we get too
Yeah.
serious, we grow up too fast, like trauma or life circumstances cause us to abandon childhood. So how are you able to, outside of like a natural ability, did you have any people in your life that like really embodied this way of living, of kind of have like a childlike curiosity or having like this affinity towards these types of things? Like where did that all play in?
That's a great question. Something that I realized recently. Well, let me think about this. So at first it was I had this awesome relationship with my little brother Tristan. So as I'm growing into adulthood, I'm regularly hanging out with somebody that is in elementary school.
Yep.
Uh so that was something. So like when you watch the kinds of shows that are for 7, 8, and 9-year olds, like Gravity Falls or Phineas and Ferb,
Oh yeah.
when you watch that kind of stuff because you're hanging out with your little brother or
They're
your son or
hilarious. Yeah.
yeah, they're hilarious.
They
They're
are.
genuinely funny. It's
Yeah.
like it like keeps you at that age group where you think all that stuff. So the thing that I tell a lot of people is just like I just never grew out of second grade. Like I
Oh
never grew out of that humor is what I mean. I never grew out of second grade humor. I still find all that stuff funny that I found funny when I was 7, 8, and 9.
there's a
And I
beautiful
and that benefits me as a kids book author because I just can write what the 7, 8, and 9-year-old version of me thinks is funny.
you're tapped in your market. Like another one of your geniuses is being able to get in front of your market and pull people into your sphere of influence that are in the places that you want to be, but also staying in that childlike wonder, and that ability is a skill set. And it's funny, there's I like do you watch so there's a cartoon, I would say like, but an adult cartoon came out a while back on Prime called Invincible. Have you seen this?
Invincible, yeah, on
Yeah.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, yeah, not for
Oh,
kids.
definitely not for
Let
kids,
no one be confused.
but amazing. It's amazing. It has some really great
I
people in
had
it too.
terrible nightmares the other night after I finished the first season.
Did you really?
Yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah, like horrible, horrible nightmares.
Yeah, no, I'm into some dark stuff in terms of like, scary movies and like adult comedies and stuff like this. So I loved it. I ate it up. But it was interesting because I still do like, so I grew up very much. I'm a big kid to this day, and
Yeah,
my thing was comic books and action figures. And if I were to
yes,
show you a spot in my house right now, I have 10,000 comic books and hundreds of action figures because I found a buddy who was like basically getting rid of them for pennies on the dollar. And I was like, "What are you doing with this?" And he's like, "Oh, we're gonna sell it." I was like, "I'll buy it." Made him an offer, and the idea was to be able to have all these things that I liked as a kid, but then show my kids how to create a business around them one day. And so, like, whether it's
yeah.
like an online store or just something, because they're into this stuff too, especially with like Marvel, the MCU. I'm big into all the Marvel shows.
Yes.
Loki just got done, which was beautiful. Have you seen Loki at all?
Yeah, oh yeah. We just
So
watched it. We
good.
just finished it. Yep.
So good. What do you think about the series?
I mean, I'm into it. Keep it going. Thanks,
Yeah.
Disney.
Yeah. Hell yeah. There you go. There's your old company. But yeah, I think it's important to never get old. Number one,
Yeah.
there's these, and I talk about this a lot in different people in different capacities, but there's these blue zones around the world. Have you heard of a blue zone before?
No.
Blue zones are where people have the most centurions, meaning they've lived 100 years or older, and they have the most in one pocket. And there's different
Oh,
ones
okay.
from like Finland to Okinawa. They're just Italy. There's all these different places around the world, and a lot of people go to genetics. Is it the genetics? Genetics. Well, some of it is that, and then they start looking at other things like diet and the meals that they're afforded around them. And then they start looking at environment, and then they start looking at other things, which was the main thing. And this ties back to I think the core of who you are. Things like never get old because you don't stop playing, dancing, singing, art, creative things, community of like-minded people. And what they're starting to find, the sciences are starting to show that it's actually the stuff that like we look at in terms of never growing older or feeling young at heart that keeps people alive longer because they're happier, they're in community with other people, they're around people that are like them. And I think there's just this really beautiful way to do life if you do stay young at heart.
Yeah, I agree. I think the tough thing to figure out is that you want to stay young at heart, but at the same time, you don't want to have like the irresponsible, I don't know what the word is for it, but like the I guess Peter
I
Pan
was gonna say
syndrome
Peter
or like
Pan. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, which would be just hilarious that we're talking about that.
That's so funny. I love it. I love it. So anyway, so now that you're figured out in your timeline of validation, like everything's a validation for you in this
Yeah.
journey of I'm
Yep.
on the right track here, and like anything else, it's extremely rare to have a really like an overnight success. Like you can have these rockets of companies that come once in a great while, but most overnight successes take 10, 15, 20 years. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen because you have to learn, you have to fall on your face, you have to grow, you have to stretch, especially if you're doing it yourself and you didn't get funding and like you're growing from grassroots, ground floor up. It doesn't happen overnight. Some happen quicker than others. So now that
Yep.
you've gotten to a year out, a year of your journey where you're like, all right, I'm making my money back. I'm kind of breaking even.
Yeah.
What was the acceleration point from there where, because in my mind as a business
Yeah.
operator, I was like, this isn't sustainable. It's like
Yep.
you're trading time for money. You're breaking even. You can't pay the bills with just this one thing alone. You have to still work over here as a character to be determined. We can't talk about that, but basically, we're going to have to figure out how to build a business. How did you scale up from there?
Yeah. There were two big moments of like realization, or maybe three. Okay, here's what they were. One, realizing that if I stopped the whole idea of I have to time my school visits to book fairs, because that was too difficult because all the schools are doing their book fairs at the same time. So I needed to like stop doing that. Okay, well then how am I going? Because what I'm getting is I'm getting the parents being led by the hand over to my table. And every one of those parents is buying my book because they'll buy the whatever book they think their kid is going to want to read. So like how can I recreate that experience but not have to be tied to going to a book fair? And I thought, well, if I make these hype videos and I make it a rule, like if you're gonna book me at your school, you have to I will not come if you've not played my series of hype videos leading up to my visit. And the hype videos are literally like you can either do 2 days or 5 days of me hyping the kids up for my visit. And I'm like showing them, funny moments in the book, and I'm like, you're not even gonna believe what's gonna happen next. And towards the end of it, I train the kids on how to pitch the idea of buying my book to their parents.
That's great.
And so I tell the kids, I'm like, okay, I'm coming to your school, whenever I'm coming. Your teacher is right now printing out a flyer for you to take home. And I don't even tell the teachers that that's in there. Like that's just it's an attachment in the video. And then I tell the kids, I'm like, look at your teacher right now. Is she printing out the flyer? And so all the kids are
Great.
yes, yes, because I learned you got to give everybody that you want to do something, you got to give them one single thing to do. So the
Nice.
principal or whoever my contact at the school, their one thing is make sure every teacher plays this video. And then the teacher's one thing is they got to play the video, but that's the forcing function of the kids are now forcing them to print out this flyer.
Yep.
And then I tell the kids, I'm like, okay, repeat after me. When you get home today, say this to your parents, mom, dad. And then I wait for them to repeat. And I go, what chores can I do? What chores can I do to earn $15 to buy a book? Um, and then they all get ready to say it. And I'm like, listen, they're gonna say yes. You're asking them if you can do chores to earn money to buy a book. Trust me, like I can't promise your parents are going to say yes, but they probably
The
will.
odds are very high. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And sure enough, the feedback I got on it was like I saw like on a message board, like a Facebook group of one of the schools that a couple of parents were like, my kid just came home and asked me what chores they can do to earn money to buy a book. Yes, please, more of that. Whatever they just did in school today, more of that, please.
Nice, nice. You're really
Yeah,
conquering a lot of things and making everybody look good. Everybody's like
yeah.
the
So
teachers feel good, the principal feels good, the parents feel good, the kids are happy. Like it's like this beautiful feeling that you're almost doing in a sense what Apple wanted to do, set out to do many years ago, which is deliver delight in a way.
yep.
Yeah.
So I started doing 1,000 to 1,500 in sales per school when I implemented that strategy. So then it was like the numbers game of like, all right, I just need to be hoofing it. I just need to be in schools constantly. And there were a couple of ways that I figured out how to do that. One is just really tap into FOMO, like try to create an engine of FOMO. So I would always, every school that I went to, I'd bring two phones with me, one for pictures and one for video. I'd pull them both out of my pocket and I'd be like, I need two responsible kids.
Mhm.
And the teachers would send up two kids. I'd give one kid one phone, one kid the other phone. And I'd be like, take as many pictures as you want, take as much video as you want. And then I had somebody on Upwork that I paid just to process that and like really quick turnaround, turn those into videos highlighting the best moments of the day. And I'd post those on social, tag the teacher that was all the teachers that I got to know at that school. They'd comment and I'd ask them to tag teachers that they know that don't go to the same school. And so that created FOMO and created, oh, how'd you get this guy? I want him at my school. And then
Building a buzz. Yeah.
my VA would just follow up with every one of those comments. And so that was my engine for that was the one that I had control over. The other thing that I realized was there's school networks, specifically charter schools. Charter schools have much more engaged parents than regular public schools. So I made more money at charter schools regardless of socioeconomic status. Like I would make more money at a lower socioeconomic status charter school than I would at a higher public school.
Makes sense.
So
They're more
because of
engaged.
parent engagement. Yeah, exactly.
No question.
So and the other nice thing about charter schools is they're often part of networks. So when you get to know a principal at a charter school, they're usually part of a group chat with a whole bunch of other charter school principals. So that was another easy way for me to start doing more
Started hacking the
schools.
system a little bit, finding out your funnel, finding out the people, the centers of influence to plug into to get you in front of
Yep.
more people.
The biggest hack for that was when I started speaking at literacy events. So I realized, oh, I need to be getting to know the coordinators of literacy events so that I could go to a literacy event because I'll book an entire month-long tour off of all the principals and teachers and media specialists that come to that event. And when I did that in 20, I want to say it was November 2019. I did my first literacy event into a tour. In a month, I did $20,000 in sales, which at that time was like, I could not imagine that amount of money at one time.
So practicality wise, were you pre-order, pre-sale? Like, cause did you have $20,000 in inventory lying around? Like, how did you get the books?
I had stopped doing bulk order hardcovers, and I started doing print on demand through Amazon. So now I switched to soft covers, experienced zero dip in sales switching from hardcovers to soft covers, which I fully expected, but it didn't happen.
How much did your
And
margin increase? Like, is there a big difference from hardcover to softcover and then print on demand? Like,
print on demand soft covers cost about the same amount as offset printed hardcovers.
okay,
So I was just, and the cool thing was, it was like Amazon. So I just needed some address that I could send to at my touring location, and I could have Amazon send the bulk order of soft covers that I was expecting to sell at that touring location. And then I had my assistant was just booking the tour in such a way. I said, I just don't want to do more than 5 hours of driving a day.
yep,
And so she would string together schools that had me driving around 5 hours, no more than 5 hours a day. And so that was how I planned to make money from then until I figured out whatever the next thing was, until COVID hit. So let's imagine that COVID never happened. I'd probably be whoever knows how I would have discovered how to make more money touring or whatever, or like, can I tour less and still make the same amount of money? What do I need to optimize? Like, who knows what I would have figured out for that. Otherwise, I would still be just like speaking at any literacy event I could and trying to book tours off of it.
blessing in disguise, right?
Yes, yes. So
Yeah,
COVID, and it was awesome, but it was like I was very tired because I was visiting two schools a day, driving around 5 hours a day, just pounding energy drinks, and
not healthy.
yeah. On top of that, at this particular time, I was going through a rough divorce, so there was just like a whole confluence of things going on. COVID hits and just wipes touring. The first thing to go
Yep.
COVID was just something that was happening in China. Schools were talking about closing off to any guests. So my touring wiped out at the beginning of the year.
Wow.
I had to go home. There went every way that I had planned to make money. I had just bought a bunch of books, so I had burnt a lot of the cash that I had. Yeah.
Re-upping, like getting your inventory back.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So I went back to work for my buddy James's company, and was writing for him and just beating my head against the idea of like, how do I make money as a kids book author again? And there's this guy named John Barrows who wrote a book called I Want to Be, it's right here. He wrote I Want to Be in Sales When I Grow Up.
Oh wow.
And he's known in the B2B sales space as the guy in sales that wrote the kids book on sales. And that was a big light bulb. I was like, "Oh, there needs to be this for every industry and anything." This is what I've later figured out. What it really is just anything that an adult is passionate about that a kid is not necessarily naturally going to be passionate about. There needs to be some vehicle like a kid's book that can be so entertaining that the kid wants to stay engaged, but gives the parent the opportunity to talk about this thing. So, for example, one of my customers now, we're writing the book I Want to Be in Marketing When I Grow Up, and I asked him, when you talk about what you do for a living as a marketer to your kids, how do you get them interested in what you do? And he was like, I don't, because they're not interested. And anytime I've ever tried to talk about it with them, they're not interested.
Right.
And that, I mean, talk about like the most fulfilling thing. Um, the books that we're making are going to help parents deeply connect with their kids over things that they either do for a living or are passionate about. Like this book on marketing that I Want to Be a Marketer When I Grow Up, it's probably one of the most hilarious kids books that I've ever worked on. Like it's really genuinely fun and funny for a kid. And so they're going to want to be read this book on a regular basis, which means dad or mom who's a marketer gets to talk about marketing with their kid on a
Beautiful.
regular basis.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. So
Yeah. So, anyways, I figured out the big question was, is there a market for this? Like, do people who are industry leaders want to be kids book authors? And the answer is no, until I start talking to them about why, and then yes.
so you taught basically what you did from what I've just heard you speak about was you learned how to do it yourself. You learned how to go through the trenches, teach yourself all the things from getting a book, published to having, a parking lot full of, or parking space full of books stacked up as furniture in the house, to taking those to cold calling schools, trying to get in the door, trying to get past the gatekeeper. Now you're past the gatekeeper. What do you say? Getting in front of the kids, sitting down, reading, trying to sell the books, going to bookstore events, going to these different things, to reshaping that whole thing and figuring out like a funnel. And then from there you figure out, okay, this is great, but there's only so much. I'm not scalable. I can't be everywhere all the time. So now you take this whole process that you validated and learned, and now you teach other people how to do it.
Well, I don't teach people how to do it, not yet anyways. I'm
Yeah.
working on right now a kid's book that,
Or
or a
you
picture
walk
book.
them
It's
through becoming an author.
yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Over a series of Zoom calls, they turn into a kid's book author. And
Incredible.
my company will do everything. So we do the illustrations and everything.
Dude,
Yep.
changing the world.
Yeah. It's very similar to like Scribe Media, if you know Scribe Media.
Was it Tucker Max?
Yep.
Yeah, Tucker Max.
Yep.
I met him in
So
person.
so they do obviously they do business books and their deal size is way higher than mine. But I
Sure.
think what the more I talk to people that are owners of businesses and they have money, and like the whole thing is like, at first it just sounds like a full on just for fun project. So you wouldn't want to spend a lot of money doing it. But then I start talking to them about it. I'm like, no, 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 like check this out. If you ever buy swag with your logo on it, the goal of buying swag is you're trying to invade the home life of your potential customers.
Get inside the house.
Well,
Yeah.
swag can't touch the penetrating power of when a kid, like I'll just say this, I'll be like, imagine if your potential customers kids are asking your potential customers on a regular basis to read them a kid's book that you made. Like, you have thoroughly penetrated their home life at that
So
point,
deep. Yeah.
especially if you're responsible for a deep connection that's happening between your potential customers and their kids over what your potential customer does for a living.
The law of reciprocity, right? It's like they would want to, you've done for them so much, and they're what really matters, right? And you've broken down some psychological barriers too. You're not selling them something on the front end that they may or may not need. You're completely circumventing that. You're building a bond, like you said, and you're creating lifetime memories. And all of a sudden, they're a lot more willing to hear what you have to say, if not already a fan of your work, to say yes before they even talk to you, before they, when they see your stuff,
Yeah. The crazy thing is I usually have to start with something much more fluffy than that. I usually have to start like just get them dreaming and be like, what is a kid's book that you would make? Like just imagine if you were to turn messages that you care about into a kid's book, what would you try to say?
Yeah.
And just that gets them dreaming. And then the question is like, can we make this strategic so that it actually works for your business? So that like you're getting customers because you've thoroughly penetrated those customers' home life with your kids' book.
Beautiful, brother. It's beautiful, man. What's going on for the rest of this year now that we're teetering a little bit? We're teetering with Corona from last year, but also the Delta variant, and there's stuff with
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
coming up and all that stuff.
So,
So where are you at
yeah.
now?
So I wish I knew the answer to that question, but I only have like hunches. I've been praying about this a lot. I think where God is leading me is um I think that personally God is pretty agnostic about whether or not Dinosaur House should or shouldn't be a company. And the thing that's cooler than that is like, can I create a whole bunch of can I have a big impact on the generation of kids that exists right now as they grow older, that they would have, that their lives would be impacted by my life. And so I want to make content that they love that is going to have a positive impact on their life. And then just like how they consume it, I don't know if it's going to be YouTube, TikTok, more kids books, or what it's going to be, but like that's where that's where my heart is at. I want to I want to have 17-year-old me with my little brother kinds of influence over the 7, 8, 9 year olds that are, and whatever age, honestly, kids that are existing right now.
It all came from a place of love, brother. Just showing up for your younger brother and just trying to change that relationship. And now you're changing the relationship of hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people before your time here is done. But keep going, brother, and keep shining your light, and keep staying young at heart. But thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks. This has been awesome.
My pleasure, brother. Look forward to chatting again and having you come on in a future episode.